Hi, everybody, and welcome to what's going to be an amazing episode of Untapped. And my name is Todd Jason. And as always, I'm sitting here with my amazing co-host, Lauren Weinstein. And we're both really excited about this conversation today. And we're really honored to have Johnson Fung on the line with us, who's going to be talking about the quality of radical empathy. And this isn't just empathy. This isn't just your mom and your dad's empathy. We're talking about something new here, radical empathy. And Johnson is going to share his story of how he uncovered this quality. And it's truly, truly fascinating. And as always, our goal with this podcast is to find the most interesting, fascinating, and successful people we can who found some unique lens or some unique quality that they've been able to magnify that has turned up more joy, more purpose, and more fulfillment in their work and their lives. And so the quality of empathy is something that we all know has value, but we're going to hear about it a little bit differently today. Now, Johnson comes from a graduate of the Stanford School of Business, and he has a very successful career as a VP of Design and Product Innovation at Pastream. He's also the former head of learning at Adobe. But this story about what we're going to hear really came about through the decision and the communication between him and his wife about whether to have children or not. Okay, and I'm not going to give it all away, but that's what we're going to be talking about here. So first off, Johnson, I just want to welcome you into this conversation. Really grateful that you've taken the time to be here with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking my personal story and giving it an opportunity to put it into some kind of like meaningful thing. It's a really good intro, but I promise I did not think this talk through as I want to talk about radical empathy. I was like, I just need to tell people this personal conflict I had with my spouse, have it published out there so my spouse can hear it, and then hopefully not get a divorce. That is my current goal. And so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I guess like in my professional career as a designer, first as a visual designer, then as product designer, like empathy is a really, really big part of that design process. And often the thought about empathy is you need to get into the other person's shoes. You need to really understand their pain point. To be facetious, often it is you as the designer are in a completely different socioeconomic class. So don't forget this other socioeconomic class and the struggles they experience as you design your products. That's almost like 80% of what the professional stuff is. And it is definitely quite superficial at the surface level. And it really took this experience of choosing whether or not we would have kids and having that conversation over the course of 4 years that I really had a different experience with what empathy means and how I felt personally as I went through that experience too. So yeah, where do you want to start?
Yeah, we want to start with Lauren Weinstein. Why don't you come in here? And I think Lauren's got the first question.
Yeah, I love it. Well, first, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Johnson and I worked together years ago, and he's one of the most brilliant and beautiful thinkers and philosophers I know. I love the way his mind works. And he told me his story, and I was like, this is such an incredible example of not only empathy, but radical empathy. And so even though his story is very specific with his wife over the decision to have children, it really represents all of us in our partnerships, in our work life. What happens when we don't see the same way as our partner? What happens when we have a disagreement at work or home? What do we do? And how he responded. It didn't work at first. He did what most of us do. And then he had this aha moment and this big shift that unlocked everything, changed his relationship with his partner, and also led to a much better outcome for both. So we'll love to dive into the story. Just a first question. We hear a lot about empathy. We're talking now about radical empathy. How would you define that? What's the difference?
Empathy should scare the shit out of you, and you should not want to do it. And it should be painful the whole time. I mean, it should, there's no shoulds, but it is often that is the case. I think empathy can be from perspective of an observer where you're outside and you're trying to walk into somebody's shoes, but like they're not home and you don't have to worry about your stuff, right? Like that's what empathy, I think, especially in a professional setting. I think radical empathy doesn't exist unless you're dealing with your own baggage and you're dealing with perspectives that you hold dear. And not just perspectives that, oh, what a surprising insight that I didn't know before. Whereas the only difference between your new insight and your previous insight was you didn't know it before. It's that the new insight should kind of shake something in your core, something that previously made you feel safe and doesn't really make you feel safe anymore. So I guess my shorthand would be, if it doesn't scare you, it's probably not radical. And you are probably not so right in all your perspectives that nothing really scares you. You're not sat into truth so much that way.
It wasn't in your career that this happened. It was in your relationship with your wife.
No.
How did this
Correct.
emerge? How did you start to realize that there was something there that was going to scare the shit out of you, right? And that you had to look Like, give us the beginning part of the story, and then we could talk about how you started to transform through it.
So real quick, let me give you like a 30-second how we met and kind of what our personalities are like. So I just fell in love with her really the first time we interacted. We were working partners, and just the way she listened, she's like the only person where I think at that time I was really young. I was like 20 something. I was in my early 20s, and I wanted to be the right person for other people. So I was very much like listening to what people wanted and did that. And with her, I like could not help but be like, I have to be myself. This is going to be a little rude, but I have to be myself. I have to be honest because I cannot be inauthentic in front of this person. I don't know why that was the case. She just brought that out of me. And so this was a person that gave me permission to be authentic the whole time. And I thought we were like flirting, and I thought we were like in a vibe. I thought we were going good. And for a year we were chatting, really good friends. And then I decided to do a grand gesture because I grew up on 90s rom-com movies, right? And so I decided to do grand gesture, and I was going to give her 7 gifts, which were pieces of each world wonder. I was traveling, vagabonding at the time. Obviously, I'm glad that this didn't end up happening because it's a problematic gift that would be canceled for today. But I gave her this box that was like, it said, "Dear Annabelle, a piece of the Great Wall, 1 of 7, and she received this gift. And then she called me, and then she was like, "Listen, I only see you as a friend," so, and I was like, oh, it really shattered. But over the course of the year, we ended up talking more, ended up listening more. And then anyway, we were together. But when we started together right in the beginning, when we started dating, I was like really all in the whole time. I was like, this is the person I'm going to marry. And I would ask her, I'd be like, do you think we should be boyfriend, girlfriend? And she would be like, I don't know. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and ask myself, do I still want to be in this relationship? And if the answer is yes, then it'll be yes. And like, okay, that sounds terrifying, but I'll respect that. Right. And so I think our personalities are such that I'm always, and that sounds awesome. That sounds great. I can envision what is about to happen. And I'm like, let's do it. And for her, she's very much like, I don't want to commit to anything more than what I know I can be responsible for, what I know I can be accountable to. Right. And this is our dynamic. So that's the first dynamic I wanted to expose. And the second dynamic is the way we communicate and the way we fight, essentially. So I, as you will no doubtedly understand by the end of this podcast, is I say whatever, I verbalize very quickly, and anything that I think or feel, I can turn that into like words quite fast. She's very the opposite of that. She can feel a lot, and she needs time to process before those can turn into words. So when we fight, what would end up happening is she'll, start being silent, and I will be like, "What? Are you mad at me? What's going on? Can we talk about it? What's happening?" And I'll physically poke her. "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" And what will happen is, because she's silent, I will perceive her silence as a kind of violence, as kind of like she's trying to hurt me by not saying anything. And the reason I perceive it that way is because the only way I would not say something to somebody while feeling angry at them or having something to say is because I want to withhold. It's because I am doing something like intentionally hurtful. And so I'm just like, so she'll just be there in silence, and I'll go from, "What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. I'll fix what I did. I'm sorry," to like, "Why are you not saying anything? I'm trying to communicate here," to like, "I can't believe you're doing this again." And I will go through this whole journey by myself without her saying a word. And she will be in her world trying to process her feelings, right? And so this is also our dynamic. I wanted to set that up so that we have like some kind of like character stuff. But we dated for 4 years. We get married. We're married for 5 years. Or actually, we're married for 5 years now. So let's say it was maybe 7 years into our relationship. We're in our early 30s, like 33, 34. And during this time, I had always talked about wanting children in a more kind of just mentioning it here and there. When we have children, or like, I can't wait until I can take my kids to this thing or whatever. And when I asked her explicitly, like, "Do you want children?" She was kind of like, maybe I will. And because that's been our dynamic about a lot of big life decisions where I'm pushing things forward and she's kind of on the maybe, I kind of took it as, okay, I guess we're going to definitely have children, and I'll just have to get her there. Right. So I think 33 end of year, we're doing our annual year review. We have a spreadsheet with all of our goals and our desires and our postmortems, and we talk about every single one. End of year review, talking about next year's goals. And I was like, okay, well, I think we're like 33, 34. I think it's time we should start thinking about like what it would be to have kids. And And she went into that silence. Right. And I was like, oh, like, what do you want? Like, and we went through that cycle. I started poking her. Why are you being silent? Is it okay? Like, we can talk about it. I'm not saying we should have kids today. And the conversation just did not move forward. And we had a fight that day, which involved me going through my cycle and her being silent the whole time. And then for the next year, we could not have a single conversation, even remotely related to having kids, that went beyond like 5 or 10 minutes. Like, it just couldn't happen. And I would try to sneak it in. Obviously, I thought I was being sneaky. She did not think I was being sneaky. I'd sneak it in. I'd be like, I really like this van that Volkswagen is coming out with. I can't wait for us to like, she's like, you want that van because you want 4 kids. I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm so innocent. I just want this van. It looks really cool. Right. And then we would actually engage in some kind of conflict. So it was this place where over the year, I started getting more and more upset, because I felt like I was the only one initiating the conversation. I was the only one trying to move the conversation forward. So I'll stop there if you have any questions, Lauren.
Yeah, I do actually, because I think it's very relatable, right? In terms of any kind of relationship that we're in, whether it is our partner or wife, it could be our boss, anyone where there's intimacy. How interesting to name the fact that we are literally living in our own universe and dealing with our own. Like, I can see you going through your pattern of kind of poking her and she's in silence, and then you're getting frustrated because that's triggering you in some way. Meanwhile, that's just the way that she is processing information, right? And so a lot of this is really trying to understand how this person is made up and how their thinking goes, right? And even people that have been together for 7 years, married, and talking about big things like having kids, how revealing it is, right? And almost like, oh, we should have already covered this, or we should have this deeper understanding. But it just, with humbleness, shows, right, like how much it really takes to cross that barrier to really understand and have intimate understanding of another human being, right? So I just love the frame of the story, because I think we can all relate to that idea of being siloed and feeling by ourselves and our own stuff. And then the other person is also feeling that way and not quite having that bridge where we can cross. And in your case, it's very direct, where there's an outcome that is either wanted or not wanted, having kids, which is a big deal. So I'm curious now, you've gone through this year, right? And there's disconnection, like it's not happening. You're not having an authentic conversation, a meaningful connection where you can actually get somewhere. What happens? Does tension build, or it's got to break? Like what's the next part of the story?
Well, there was one day where she went to have lunch with her old roommates, whom she's really, really close with. And both of them are like in her network and in our friend group, like these strong, independent, thoughtful women. And they both recently had kids. And so she goes to lunch, and then she comes back, and I'm just like, so what did you learn? And she's livid. She's livid. And I feel like everybody on the other side of this conversation who is not me is like, well, of course you would be. And I just want to fully recognize that this is exactly, like, I want to tell the story because the experience I had is in such ignorance. And I want to recognize that. Right. So, okay. So I'm like, so what did you learn? Right. And I was like, oh, I'm being curious and open. And I'm like trying to engage her, and I'm asking a question. This is all the checkboxes. And she's just so upset. And she was like, I'm doing all of this work to try and figure out like what this experience is actually going to be like. And you are not doing any of the work. She said, it feels like we are trying to decide where to have dinner. And you already are at the restaurant. And you're calling me and you're saying, so what are you feeling tonight? This food or this food? Like, you are already at the destination and you're just waiting for me to get there when I'm trying to tell you, I don't know if I want to be there yet. Right. Also, she did not just articulate this all in the middle of the fight. This is summarized over the weeks after. And then finally she said, and I think this was really what hit me. She was like, I don't think that you know what you're asking me to do. I don't think you know what this actually entails. Go do your homework. Right. And I really love it when people tell me to go and do effortful work, because there's a direction there. I'm like, oh, you want me to obsess and like be neurotic and like do work? I could do that. And so I was like, you're totally right. I have not done any work. I have not talked to anybody. I have not read any books. I'm going to go read some books. I'm going to go read some books and I'll come back to you. And again, I was very much like, let me be the good boy, the good student, the good son, the good, all the times I've been asked to be good. And I will come back and I will get what I want. Right. Just to be the villain here. So that's what happened. That was this inciting incident where I kind of started being like, okay, I get it. I'm waiting. I shouldn't wait. And I started picking up my first book. The first book I read actually was a book called Like a Mother. It was like a feminist Filipino woman who talks about what the process of pregnancy and birth is throughout history and what that looks like. And I don't need to go into the details of the book, but like most books that are about, hey, here's the actual history of what these things are like. You have a bunch of, oh my gosh, my whole world is shook because I didn't know this was the case. So one example, and for me, it was very much medical experiences that I took for granted as objective policies that were meant to maximize, patient outcomes, for example, that were like science-based, that turns out to be like totally not. So one example might be like the stereotypical idea of having a woman giving birth on her back in stirrups was not really a thing. Like that was not really a position. It really came to popularity when Louis the something decided that he really wanted to just watch childbirth. And in order for him to get the best view, he wanted the women to be in a particular position. So he just commissioned a table to be made for that position so he can like creepily watch from behind the curtain. And like that, and then it just became popular. And then that's why we do that, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Another one might be don't eat sushi while you're pregnant. Obviously, something that is a lot of people know as like popular knowledge. But there's a really big difference between sushi in America versus that you got in the early 70s when, like, let's say that recommendation was made, versus sushi in Japan, like today with modern sanitization. There's a really, really different like risk profiles, let's say. And so suddenly you have a don't eat sushi, or you're pregnant, you go into a sushi restaurant in Vancouver where we have some of the freshest sushi and somebody judges you, right? So there's just like, it just started coming to me like, oh, a lot of these policies are these things that have nothing to do with Annabelle, have nothing to do with our lives, are not meant for her well-being. And we're suddenly going to need to go and look through all of these little details to figure out what's actually going to apply to us. And so that was just like a little dip. And when that happened, I started going deeper and I read a book called Now We Have Everything, which was a memoir of a woman who had kids before she was ready. And this was when I started to be like, I'm going to start reading books from people. Like, what would happen if we had this baby and we were not ready for it? Or that Annabelle was like still on a maybe. And so in this book, there's a lot of like personal anecdotes about the things that she was thinking. But one particular instance was they decide to have a baby and she's pregnant and they're driving in a tunnel. I don't know why it's important. It's important for me. And she's like, I haven't felt the baby kick in like a few hours. We should go to the hospital right now. And the husband was like, no, it's okay. Like we did the ultrasound last week. Baby doesn't really kick sometimes over the course of a few hours. It's okay. Don't worry. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I don't feel a kick. I really want to go to the hospital right now. And I want to get this checked out. He's like, no. And he pulls out his phone. He starts Googling, is it normal for babies to not kick like for a few hours during the day? He's like, look, it's normal. Like, see this. And she gets increasingly frustrated. And this moment was so powerful for me because he's acting exactly as I would act in the version of me that I think is a good husband, which is to like calm her down and like make sure that she doesn't feel too much. But I was trying to make her feel better. Right. And when the author is able to actually verbalize what was going on in her head at this time, which made his statements so outrageous, it gave me an opening to be like, oh yeah, that is totally outrageous. Because she says, when I didn't feel the baby kick, what I felt was that by bringing life into the world, we brought in the possibility of death. And I feared so much what that death would mean, how we would deal with it, how it would affect us, how it would affect me, all this grief that could happen. And when he says, don't worry, and when he continues to double down on this idea that everything is okay, what I felt was that I was the only one who was left to deal with the possibility of grief, with the possibility of death. And knowing that I was the only one dealing with that made me feel so lonely. And so I read that and I was like, yeah, she's totally in the right. There's no other answer than yeah, that sounds super scary. Let's go to the hospital and check it out. Could be totally nothing, but let's go. Because I'm with you. I'm with you in managing this possibility, no matter how small, right? And so I think that book made me go, oh, there is a whole world, like a whole universe, Todd, to your point earlier. There's a whole universe of feeling and thinking and consideration that I have no access to. And partially, I have no access to it because systematically, even at as objective as the medical system, let's say, and as objective as science, I do not have access to because I was not designed. That stuff was not designed to be shown and seen. And then with Annabelle personally, it was not. And then me, and then this is where it gets real, is like me as a man, I have had the privilege to not see it for a very, very, very long time, right? And so then and then I felt really scared. And I had this book on my wish list for a very long time. And I did not read it. And I did not buy it. And then finally after this book, I bought it. And it was called, actually there's two, but one is called Regretting Motherhood. Women who became mothers and regretted motherhood. And then the second book was Look How Happy I'm Making You, which is a series of short stories from women who had children and have really strong kind of, I guess, like opposing feelings about that experience. And I was so scared of picking these books up. And when I asked myself, like, why was I so scared to pick these books up? The reason was I was afraid of getting my mind changed. I was afraid that I would read these books and then I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's really sucks. And I don't want her to do this. I was afraid of I didn't have it fully articulated, but I was so scared. So I read these books, a few things I learned. So actually, there's this one funny scene. Annabelle and I are on an airplane. I'm reading this book, which is this anthology of stories about women who had babies and had a particular experience. And Annabelle's beside me. And I'm just like open jawed and then mansplaining every one of these stories to her. I'm like, Annabelle, this woman like didn't want a baby, but her husband wanted a baby. So she she had two babies. And then when she had these babies, her husband was like, you're not paying enough attention to me and I'm going to leave you. So then she was stuck raising these two babies and for the rest of her life, while her husband just had whatever life he wanted. And then it was like, and this woman really wanted a baby and her husband didn't want a baby, but then he said, okay, I'll be a father. And then she had a baby and then he left her. And I'm like, and this woman wanted a baby and his husband wanted a baby. And then they tried to have babies and they couldn't have babies. And now her whole family blames her for not having any babies. And then I was like, and this woman wanted a baby, her husband wanted a baby, they had a baby, everything's great. But her body is fucked. This is and I'm just going through these stories. And she's like, uh-huh. She's like, yes, thanks for explaining these things to me, right? I'm going to do this. And I think as I was going through it, and then this is one of my big feelings of, oh, I know nothing about this is very typical of, I think, someone in privilege. But I assumed that being a mother was about the actions you take and the stuff that happens in your life, right? You have a kid. Now you have responsibilities for this kid. And you have your partner. And it's this little circle of people that you have. But one of the things that all of these mothers say is, I do not regret my children. And I do not regret any of the moments I spent with them. I regret motherhood. And that made me realize that motherhood is different than having children. And motherhood is different than being a mother. Motherhood is a role. It's a mask that then everybody else in the whole world, both explicitly, implicitly, and in your own brain, is imposing on you what it means to be a mother. It means that you should do this and you shouldn't do this. It means that we're allowed to judge you if you order a glass of wine or not. It means that we are allowed to judge whether or not you should do this with your children or you should quit your job or not quit your job. It is it is the opting in to oppression, because fundamentally the role has oppression built into it. And so anyway, I was going back to Annabelle's statement of, you don't know what you're asking me. You don't know what you're asking of me. And when I finally understood, at least at the surface, at least right at just the tip of the iceberg of what motherhood means, I was like, why? How could I ever ask her of this? How could I ever ask her to do this for me or for us without her being like, I really want to do this? Mm-hmm. How could I possibly assume that this is just our natural course of relationship? We get married, we have kids, all the rest of it. And so anyway,
I was just saying what's so important here, I think, is we're generally either in curiosity or defense. And most of us go to defense, right? You could have for years and months defended your position, but instead you went to curiosity. And it's through curiosity that you're able to move forward, that you have understanding, right? Because even in that example with the mother saying, like, I don't feel good, there's something wrong with the baby, the husband, it seemed like he's a good guy, but it's actually defensive. No, 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 no. Like, it's okay. He's defending. He's not honoring what she's feeling. There's a block to that feeling rather than like, tell me more. What's coming up for you? Would it feel better to Google it? Would you like to go to the hospital? Right? Like being with her in that experience rather than against her. I'm with you. What to you? Help me understand what you're feeling. Because often, like Todd said in the beginning, we don't understand someone's past really. Like we don't understand their childhood. We don't understand what motherhood might mean. We don't understand why they're worried and afraid. We might think this is fine. Like, why do you care? But it's a big deal for that person. So we tend to negate emotional experiences. We do that with our kids, with our partners. So what does it mean to be like, well, I don't feel that way, but tell me more. Like, I'd like to understand you. What makes it feel this way? What would make you feel better? How could I support you? Like, I think it's so important what you were doing to move to curiosity and also to be with someone in their experience, even if you don't understand it or see the world from that lens. And so that's just huge. And then to get to really do your research and your homework, to have true empathy, like I really get it. And I think what you said in the beginning of radical empathy, it's scary, right? Sometimes we don't want to know the other side because we're afraid what it might mean. So just the bravery in that, but it's the only way really through. Like it was the only way to come back to connection was to go where you didn't want to go, to like the deeper harder truth. So
there's a consequence to curiosity in these moments that is not the same as being curious at like a user interview or at like a marketing research day. You know, that it's like, of course, you like, and I think there's a lot of people who talk about like choosing curiosity as if it was just as if it's just like a strategy that you choose. And to me, I feel like it's really, what is the consequence of this curiosity? The consequence of the curiosity in the car is that we're going to have to go to the ER, and that there might be more emotions, and you know, she might feel even worse when we get there, and maybe there is something wrong. Like those are all the consequences of that particular curiosity. The consequences of my curiosity is maybe we won't have kids, which for me was very scary.
One more thing before we do go, we want to hear that piece, the next part of the story, but I got to echo what Lauren said and also honor. And I think how does this apply to our lives and our situations, right? When she said to you, go figure out what you're asking me to do, and you kind of nodded and you said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that, right? That was the start. That curiosity was so key because it led you to a path of discovery where you were willing to understand someone else's perspective by actually taking time and reading books and listening to podcasts and actually doing research. So and in that process, you started to uncover real things where your reality was challenged. Your assumptions that you had around it were challenged. And at that moment, you could have either turned away or you could have looked at it objectively, which is what you did, and said, okay, like this is actually what's going on. And what you came to was your real fear, which was the idea and the story that you had about, I may not have kids with her, right? Like you had to get to that point of your own real fear to confront it, which I think is what led to the transformation. And I think that's where a lot of us fail. Like we were not willing to go to what we might lose and what are we actually so attached to. We're shielding ourselves from getting curious about the other person because we're terrified about what we might find out about them and their truth and what that means for us and the real life consequences in our lives. And that's why I love the story, because you did this process and you did everything right. And then you met the truth, the possible fear of it, and then you continued to go. So take us from there. Once you started to get to the point of the realization, like, wow, okay, like this might not actually happen for me, and it's my own fear, my own story that's coming up. To take us through that piece, and then what happened next.
Just a quick note before you get into that is like, I definitely felt a lot of this kudos, even from myself during the process. I was like, oh God, I'm so brave. And then at some point I was like, you know, this fear that I have to experience in order to like do this empathetic exercise, Annabelle feels that fear all the time. Like she feels that fear because she's not in a position of power, like in this conversation. And she doesn't have the choice to like curiosity or not curiosity. She just has like the world being like, you should have kids. And if you're not, like, what the heck are you going to do with your life? Like that's what she has. And so there's also like, I feel like there's something here where part of me going in and this bravery that I need to exhibit in this moment has something to do with the privilege I had in this moment as well. It's like, I can ignore this and be safe. I can actually just be like, I'm sorry, if you don't want to have kids, I guess this wasn't a good relationship, and then go find somebody else who has kids, because the whole world is convincing everybody else that having kids is great, right? It's on my side. I don't have to deal with my fear. But she doesn't have a choice, right? She has to do it. And so that's something I just wanted to caveat is like, I don't want to come off as a hero in the story, partially because I think for her, it's really the stuff that she has done is way, way harder, which we can talk about. Okay. So that out of the way. Next book I read. So now I'm just like, okay, I need to take a step back here and really consider the possibility that I'm going to go back and tell her, I can't ask you to do this. So you really, if you don't want to do this, we don't have to do this. And I'm like, and that was, even saying it now, I have residual fear from that time. And I got another book called The Baby Decision is a book that helps couples who are on the fence. They go through various questions that you both ask yourself, little exercises and reflections, and then you do it as a couple to like help you figure this out. So I was like, I'm going to go do this book. And I'm going to do it by myself first, because I know that Annabelle's already been doing this book without needing a book to do it. So one of the first questions was like, why do you want to have children? Why do you want to have children? I think, Todd, to your point earlier, there was a lot of me just being, well, of course. Like, do I need to make this argument? Have you seen the movies from the 90s and the 2000s? Having children is awesome, right? Why do you want to have children? And I was like, well, I think the reason I really want to have children is because I think there are so many amazing things about the world, about like the experience of the natural world, learning about science, understanding about people. Like, I love life so much. And I really, really love the experience of watching somebody else go through that. It like lights me up to think about somebody discovering dinosaurs for the first time and what that might be like. And not just the cool stuff. Like I want to be witness to somebody going through emotional development and discovering themselves. Like all of that stuff is like so awesome to me. And then I went through some reasons that other people have that like don't really apply to me. Like I don't really care that they look like me or is like a miniature version of me. I don't really care about legacy. I'm pretty nihilistic in terms of like we die and that's it. And so there's nothing about progeny that appeals to me. And some of the other things around like, yeah, like even like there's some things about personal development that I attach to, but mostly it was just that. And then the book asks, what is the version of your life? Can you get that thing you want from having kids without having kids? And I was like, well, my brothers will probably have kids. I could be a really cool uncle. And I could, if I really design my life such that I can be an uncle that's really there, I can actually bear witness to a lot of that growth for my like niblets as they grow up. And then when I was having that thought, I was like, okay. And then also I would help my brothers out a lot, especially now that I'm starting to understand how much childcare really is in terms of work and what that looks like, that having additional hands, I could be that for my brother. And then I thought about my parents getting older and how if I didn't have children of my own, I could also build my relationship with them deeper and then support them as well. And then I had this like moment where I was like, I wouldn't have my own children, but then I could go to Italy and learn how to make pasta for like 3 years if I wanted to, right? And then I was like, pasta. And then my parents having a friend. And then me being like a really good sibling and my brothers not needing to like go through almost divorce because they had kids and it was too hard to manage. And I get to watch somebody grow up. And at this moment where I'm like, that would be a good life. And I so distinctly remember this feeling where I had this moment of that would be a good life. And then I had a panic attack. It was just like, ooh, and then boom. And I couldn't breathe. I was like it was like middle of the night. It must have been like 2 or 3 a.m. because I was like reflecting on this. I remember like having a little out of body at that moment. And be like, oh, you're having a panic attack right now. That's really interesting. Like, it's really interesting that this thing scares you so much. That the idea that it would be like that you're in the moment of convincing yourself that it's good. That you have such a hard pushback. So I waited until it was Eastern time, like 7 a.m. And I called my therapist I called my best friend, then I called mentors. I was like, we gotta talk through this. So yeah, that was kind of like this moment of me realizing that this whole time I thought I was managing Annabelle's fear. I thought I was managing her fear of not wanting to get into something that she wouldn't want to get into. And really, all of that was driven. My lack of empathy was driven. My lack of curiosity up until that point was all driven by like an existential fear that I had about my life not being the way I wanted it to turn out. It wasn't about her fear at all. So I think after like 3 days of processing, I went back to her and I was like, yeah, I think I would be okay in either version of our life. In the life where we don't have kids, I think we could have a really good life. And in the version where we have kids, I think we could have a really good life. I really think so. It's scary, but I think so. And she goes, okay, let's talk about whether or not we want to have kids. And that day was the first day after a year and a half where we had our first real conversation where we were able to talk about that. Her defenses were down. She was like, you're on my team now. I'm not here trying to protect my identity and my independence. And you're here, you can see the wave of the outside world and what they expect of mothers. And at least we can do this together.
There's so much I want to highlight in that. One, what you said, I call this emotional lasagna, which means we think like it's anger, but then it's really hurt. And we think it's hurt, but then it's really guilt under that. And we think we're angry at the other person, but really we're angry at ourselves, right? So just like what you said, right? You think you're trying to protect and manage her fear, but really this is all about your fear the whole time. And so if there's something you're protecting and there's not full truth and transparency, it is really hard to move forward, right? Because it's just obscured. Like you're not actually having the real conversation. And I think, but both of us, men and women, but as a woman, I'll say like, it's only through openness and space do I feel able to come forward, right? Like if I know it can go either way and there's that safety and that space, then I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk about it. What do I really want? Rather than something's being forced on me or the restaurant, right? So it's the only way that doesn't lead to resentment or sacrifice or even this word compromise, because we'll get to it later, but you actually came out with a beautiful solution that met both your needs that could only come by understanding both of your needs and what was important to you. Those facts and details weren't even there otherwise. So,
yeah, this is why I think it's a universal story, right? Because we can all relate to having an underlying fear around a challenging situation, a hope, a dream that involves the consent and camaraderie or partnership of another or others that may or may not come true, right? And this is just human. We all have this, okay? This is just flat out human. And I love the process that you went through. It's a real process that you went through here where you did start with curiosity, right? And that led you down a path of confronting the real fear, right? Which then led you to the openness and the idea of what would it look like without. And I think that is such a powerful exercise. What would my life look like without this thing that I think and that I want so badly in my bones? This is deeply embedded in you culturally as a person, right? So like, what would it look like without? And then you got that openness, right? The openness came. You could almost see him lying there at 3 o'clock in the morning, like, oh my God, like actually, man, I'm going to be best friends with my dad. I'm going to be in Italy making pasta. I'm going to be the best uncle of all time. I'm really going to satisfy this need and more. And then boom, the wall comes back in, right? And then that fear comes back almost like its final swipe at you, right? Its final test. That's what it feels like. Your initiation was almost complete. And then the fear is like, and I'm going to physically rock your world with a panic attack. Right. Which then you did the smart thing, which is you called in the support, you called in your mentors, you talked to people. By the way, so important that you did that you call people to talk this out, right? Your friends, your allies. And then you came to this openness, this rawness with your wife. And it was immediate, right? Energetically, she was now there. She felt you there. She felt your presence. And now you could actually work on a solution, that may or may not work for both of you. Now you're real. You got real. And you went through a beautiful process of breaking down your own barrier, your own wall, your own egoic structure, your own thought. Everything you said is beautiful. to get to that point of realness and rawness. And now here we are having that conversation. So I just love the process.
Oh, I
Oh,
just want to add one thing too. Before we jumped on the call, you said at the end of the day, like we really all just want love and safety. Would love if you could comment on that, because what you did by saying, I could see a really great life without kids, you made it safe for her to say no to motherhood, right? You actually gave her safety. And it's only when we feel safe that we can open, that we can come forward, that we can move. So would love if you can just comment a little bit about the love and safety piece, because that's really what for her and yourself, actually. You made it safe also for you to not have kids. Like at the end of the day, what you gave each self and her was safety.
First therapy session I ever had, my therapist starts by saying, "Hey, let me tell you a little bit about my framework, about how I think people work. I think at the end of the day, everybody just wants love and safety. And everything we're going to talk about is going to come back to love and safety." And I was like, Cam, I did an undergraduate philosophy degree. People are way more complicated than just love and safety. And 4 years later now, I'm like, nope, it's all love and safety. All Buddhism talks about is love and safety. All these other, all other spirituality, often it comes back to love and safety. This thing I think about for work, about this technical implementation, about this architecture that I really hate, probably to do with love and safety. I think between me and my, head of engineering or whatever. So it always comes back down to that. And so I feel like often now I'm either, when I'm feeling a strong feeling or I feel like there's some block, I'm either going to go top down. What am I feeling right now? What's going on? And how do I slowly go down the lasagna layers to get to love and safety? I assume that love and safety is at the bottom of that, right? Or I'm feeling this thing about this thing. Let me start at love and safety and start building my way up. How do I build my way up and get to where I am? I want to feel safe. I don't feel safe because I told that in order to feel safe, I had to be really perfect. And right now, this person's decision is preventing me from my project from looking perfect. Therefore, I'm really feeling like upset at their technical implementation of something. Really, it's just me not feeling safe, that my safety is at risk. So,
Like, my engineer I'm being challenging with my engineer. Like, it seems like a superficial issue, but like, it's actually because you don't feel safe. You're worried you won't look perfect. Right. So anytime we're triggered, really, it's because at some fundamental level, this situation has me not feeling safe or not feeling loved. So this person's being angry, shutting down. Any fight or flight response is because of a lack of that in ourselves.
Oh my gosh. Like during COVID, when our like social tribe was just our Zoom meetings, it's like every work became reality TV. Like every work suddenly became, am I going to be a part of this tribe or not a part of this tribe? And if I'm not, like all of that isolation, I felt like when I look back at the conflicts I had at work during that period of time, I could see myself being hyper heightened in the parts of me that feel like I really want to belong or that I really want to be accepted, So I think there's all of these, like, it's hard for me to think of a professional situation that isn't actually tied to the personal situation.
I know. And I love you said the parts of me. Right? Because that's what it is. It's parts of us, the part of us that wants to feel loved, the part of us that wants to hear these words or be accepted, right? Like, I think just separating it from yourself is actually important language. Yeah, the part of me wants to be accepted and loved, and like, that's so normal, and versus getting so like spun out by it. It's a part of me. Like, I think you can have more compassion from that place. So tell us what happened. So you sit down, you said, game on, let's talk through what happened next.
Yeah. So then we were like, I was surprised at how quickly we basically skipped all the philosophical questions about whether we wanted to have kids or didn't want to have kids, or like we got right to the practical stuff so fast to like, what's it actually going to take? How much time is it going to take out of us? Is it going to be our lives going to change in a way that we can take responsibility for? Right. And, so immediately she was like, I was like, okay, it's my turn. I can do more research now. I can take on this burden. I understand all the burden that you have to take on. Let me do the research and tell you exactly like all of the stuff that we need to do if we wanted to move forward with having a kid, right? What this would entail. First thing I saw, German study. I'm going to misquote this, so you'll have to make like some kind of disclaimer correction after. But they looked at life events that happen to people and the units of happiness that drop as a result of those life events. And so I believe that a divorce is like negative 0.7. The death of your partner is negative 1.3. And having a newborn is negative like 1.8. Yeah. it is on average worse. And the thing is that if you look at the distribution of the graph of the people who surveyed, there's like 25% of the people whose happiness like net positive. And then there's some people in the middle that's kind of like in that level of as bad as divorce. And then there are the people in the bottom 25% that are like -3, right? Like twice as bad as your partner dying. It's like the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? And so that's the distribution. So I was like, okay, I was like, I need to dive in to figure out like what is happening in this graph. Who are the kinds of like, what are the support that's happening? How are they approaching childcare? How are they approaching this problem that makes it like this, right? So I did, as on brand as I am, read another 50 books on like how at all the different ways to take care of the child. Came back to Annabelle with it, and the one concept that we came back with that my best friend actually gave to me, who him and his partner also went through a very similar thing, a very similar journey. He was like, okay, it seems so silly to say out loud now that I'm on the other side, but he's like, have you heard of primary parenthood? And like, he's like, primary parenthood is when it's like, there's always a person who's going to be the person who is actually responsible for all of the emotional labor related to your kid. It is very unlikely that both parents know the phone number of the doctor, or like which doctor to call, or when the last time the checkups are, right? Or if there's still baby snacks in the drawer. It's not both partners that know that. It is the primary parent who knows that. It's the primary parent who's going to be the first called, like the first person to respond, the person to make those decisions. It's the primary partner that's likely not going to work, right? And I think when I had this language, I went back to Annabelle and I was like, Annabelle, what if I'm the primary partner? And she goes, are you asking me to be a dad? Because I always want to be a dad. I've always wanted to be a dad. If you just told me that you wanted me to be a dad, I would have said yes like a long time ago. And I was like, yeah, what would it look like for me to take on like all like these responsibilities? What if I was primary parent? And then we talked about it and it was immediate. I was like, okay, well, I'll go part-time for my job, work 3 days a week, maybe even work less, or I'll take off 6 or 7 months, maybe the whole year in the beginning. I'll do all of the nights. We'll figure out the way we do, breastfeeding and bottle feeding to make that work. But we will divide this labor up in a way that is so disproportionately on my plate that maybe we will get 50-50. And this is the thing I feel like I want to underscore for anybody who's actually practically making this decision. I feel like the worst thing you can do with both housework and baby work as a heterosexual couple is try to aim for 50-50, because there is no way you'll get 50-50 when you get 50-50. I think that when the person who traditionally does not do as much of that work, in my case, the guy, it's when they feel like things are definitely super unfair. That's when 50-50 is probably what you're getting, because I'm just like, not never been expected of me to do that much emotional labor or house labor. And so I was like, let's design it so I do 80% of the work and move forward in that. Let's have me stop working full time and pause my career. I don't need to go any further in my career. Let me take on the nights. Let me take on figuring out how to book everything. And I think when I said that, she was like, let's start trying. And I was like, what? It was again, this contrast between the complete roadblock we were in. So her being like, I just have these things I need you to get on board with, without me feeling like I've made you come on board with these things, because you need to know what you're signing up for at this point. So that happened. And then 2 days later, I called my friend and I was like, what am I going to write on my resume? Yeah. Which, if you know me and you know my friends, is a very, very, very funny statement to make, because I've been an entrepreneur all my life and I haven't given a shit about anything to do with my resume. I can tell my story however I want, like never cared about it ever. And then the one time I step into the role that traditionally is like the experience of my partner, a woman, I'm like, how am I going to explain this on my resume? And it's really funny. So all of that happened.
I want to pop in one thing, because we want to hear, right? We have, another few minutes here. We want to hear how it's been going and what's transpired since. But I just want to highlight something really important that you shared, right? That I think is really at the crux of this, of why radical empathy, like why do all that work that Johnson did, right? And really, as you're listening to this, like trying to apply this in some way in your life, right? Where it's not the exact situation, we can't do the exact same amount of research per se for our boss, but we can do things to expand our awareness about what they may be going through or what they may not see or what their perspective is, right? And his story is very direct in this way, but it's really meant to have you think about how you can apply this system, this way of being empathetic in your life so you can experience the result. But the key thing I want to point out that I think is so fascinating, so beautiful, is you said it was surprised that once you got the okay to have the conversation for the first time in a year, it went very fast, meaning that you just started getting into the practicality of it. Then I've seen this time and time again with myself and also with my clients and anyone that I've coached over the years, that once you get to that point of realness and rawness and truth, where you face your own fear and attachment and are able to see past it, even if it causes discomfort or pain, and then you approach the other person or people around it, it tends to do something energetically where you get to that same page and you're able to get to solution very fast, much faster than you think you can. It's always the same way. You get to the solution, like it's surprising, like da-da-da-da, right? All that emotional work counts. It counts like much more than we in our modern culture tend to believe. So I just want to point that out, that is very, very common that ends up happening. And then just to cap the story, how beautiful to come up with a solution that probably was never on your mind before, was it, Johnson? Right? The idea that you would wear that role, right, probably never even occurred to you, but you had to go through this process to even have this new possibility emerge or be birthed into your field, right? Isn't that beautiful? Right? Is that how it was for you?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it would have never been on my radar that she would be a stay-at-home mom. That was clear. But I think for a lot of people, that's like pretty default. Like, yeah, I wouldn't ask you of that. That would be so unfair. My assumption was just that we would both kind of work and we'd get childcare and then we would figure it out. And what I learned was there's no way that happens without also a primary parent. And so it never occurred to me, like, I guess it couldn't occur to me because it wasn't even an option that I thought needed to exist. Like I didn't see it as a potential option. And for her, it was the invisible default. And I think there could be a whole different podcast about just the difference between an invisible option for somebody being an invisible default for somebody else and like what that dynamic looks like. But yeah, that opening of me saying, okay, I think I could have a life without kids, and then all of the stuff that has happened after, I'm very proud of our current setup. We are really relaxed. We are really healthy. And now I know more about like what Avery, our son, needs in this moment. He needs that calmness, and we're able to provide that. I also know that if we got to where we are today and did not have those conversations, we'd be talking about divorce. It would be so hard. So many things would have gone on. Even during the time when we were trying to have kids, we tried for about a year to have kids. During this period of time, I started looking at all the forums, all the people trying to have kids. And I'm just witnessing other people breaking down every time they see a negative result. Every time it's another, maybe I will never have kids. Every time, it's not a good space. And for me, I was like, I kept showing Annabelle these things because she wouldn't be so masochistic to read these forums. But I was like, I'm so glad that we are in a position where we're kind of like, I hope this happens. And if it happens, it would be awesome. But if it doesn't happen, it would be okay too. And it kind of gave us a lot less pressure and a lot less stress during that process.
You'd already done the work to come to peace with that, right? So the no was like,
Yeah.
I already found that there was an amazing, beautiful life without kids. So it's okay. You have a preference, but it wasn't existential anymore versus that might have broken you.
That's true. We're like sad, but it wasn't the breakdown that we like maybe I would have had every night, which would have definitely increased our tension with each other. Right. As she started to see how much it was like meaning for me, but then she would feel like, but it's my body. Maybe my body is feeling your desire, etc. Right? Like there's so much domino effects that is happening on one side or the other side.
Peaceful situation between you, like a healthy, safe environment with a creative solution that would never have been uncovered before if you hadn't gone through this process. And that's what I think is fascinating. A lot of people are like, well, how do I come up with a creative solution? Radical empathy. Actually really connect with another human being. Be fearless. Be so curious where it hurts. Johnson, this is what you embody. It's a very beautiful story. You're embodying the massive discomfort, the willingness to go there, to confront your own fear, that's how you get to the creative solution. You can't see it until you do it. You just wouldn't have come up with that before. It wasn't in your field of vision. You had to expand your field of vision, which often requires going into discomfort. So one last question before we start wrapping up. So you feel that the seeds of this process has led to a result that's been really satisfying for you and for your wife. How's she doing? Is it been going well for her?
Yeah. I mean, we got really, really lucky. Our kid is like, his temperament is, he slept by himself for a very long time. And that has made a big, big difference. But I think we have a lot of conversations now where she's talking to her friends who have kids. And she comes back to me and she keeps saying, I'm so glad we did all of that. I'm so glad I stood my ground, you know? And she is overall like a timid person who also has high integrity. And I am so grateful to her that she stood up for herself. I think when we talked about like being in a relationship with somebody and then us deciding that the partnership was the main goal, that's how I think about it. My number one goal in life is our relationship. That's like the number one thing I'm optimizing for. Everything is under that thing. And then I'm somewhere in there, but I am also a part of the relationship. And I think that's what people, not to make a big, that's what I didn't understand before. When I thought about making the partnership the number one thing, I thought about it as I sacrifice myself for the partnership. I do the stuff for the partnership. Okay? I quash my own desires for the partnership, which is very like sacrificial, lot. We can go all the way down to love and safety on that one, right? So that's how I perceived it. But I think she came to it saying, I also prioritize the relationship and accept that I am part of that relationship. And so there's some times where prioritizing the relationship means I have to prioritize myself. And the thing she wanted to prioritize more than anything is not to be alone in this journey. And so she goes, I am not moving forward and I am risking our relationship in order to see the only path forward where we move forward together. And that allowed space for me to say, okay, then in this case, the best thing for the relationship is for you to stand up for yourself and me to take a step back. And then now we're in a place where we're moving together, which is why we have that speed to results.
I love that because I find that too, whether it's romantic partnership or business partnership, like the most important thing is the relationship. Like when we're on the same page, when we're connected, there's so much more ease, like business decisions, ideas, momentum, it just like moves. And when there's disconnect or resentment or there's not full truth and transparency, it doesn't move. It's blocked and it's like the shutdown and the control. And it's so hard to stabilize the ship. But when you have that radical empathy and everything's out, you do create a more solid foundation and really peace. Because truth is truth. There's nowhere to go. It just is. Like, there's nothing to argue with. Like, you kind of surrendered to what is. Yeah. And I remember when I had a relationship and I was afraid that he no longer wanted to be in it, but I was afraid to ask that question. But I told myself it's true whether I ask it or not, right? Or if we believe it, we don't hear it, that it doesn't exist. But that's actually worse. And I checked in and it turned out not to be the case at all. Which I thought of earlier with your point around the silence. I wanted to bring up this difference between an observation and a story. Because often there's just an observation and then we make a story out of it. So the observation is she's quiet. She's not saying anything, right? But your story was she's mad, she's withholding. But how often we do that in our relationship, right? Like I was making a story. He didn't want to be in it anymore when that wasn't true. And so I think it's just so helpful when we notice our partner or someone doing something that we don't jump to story. We just say, what am I physically observing is happening? And what might that mean? And getting curious.
To the point of radical empathy for yourself, it's like I have to recognize these like heuristics I have, like telling the story, kind of semi-manipulating my partner to get her to say yes on things. Like all of these things that I've had to unlearn. There are moments where I felt shame about having these things. Like, oh, I can't believe I have all this programming in my head. I need to get over it. And I think there's something about, you have to be empathetic to yourself that these things exist in order to protect you. They just don't always know what they are protecting. Right. And so there's parts of me where I'm like, okay, thank you. Thank you for telling me the story. I know you're just trying to protect me. I hear you. Thank you, advisor in my head. I'll take it under consideration and then moving forward. And I feel like that has also really helped me in a lot of these cases versus if I try to actively reject those voices, they just get louder. It's like your parents giving you advice and then you're like, and then you start to like argue with them about their advice. They're not going to, at no point would most parents go, oh, your argument is very sound. I will stop giving you this advice now. Right. It's like when you argue back, they double down, because they're trying to protect you. And I think a lot of these things that make us have bad relationships are trying to protect us. And I think it's good to recognize that.
Yeah, to your point, we argue with our own emotions, right? We feel sad or we feel angry or anxious and we argue. I don't want to feel that way. But if you're like, hey, anxiety, I see you.
Yeah,
What's going on?
totally.
What's coming up? It's that same level of curiosity. Okay, I'm anxious because of this. And here's the story that I'm telling. Even that languaging, there's a part of me that wants this and is afraid of that. Just holding that and that piece, whatever you do with it yourself and whether you choose to share it is everything. So really this is about like, what is the way forward for ourselves and for other. And I love, like once someone said, if it's not in alignment for me, it's not in alignment for you, right? Two people need to be in alignment for something to work. And so, yeah, thank you just for your brilliance today, your story and sharing it with us so we can learn from it as well. So many gems for ourselves and others. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, Johnson, I want to thank you too. I mean, I think you really model the process here. It's a real process, that you did somewhat naturally and then confronted yourself and then got an outcome that you really, wasn't foreseeable before you started the process. I think it's applicable to every area of our lives. So I just want to really honor your story and the courage that you undertook. I know you said you don't see yourself as a hero, but you certainly are, as is your wife, right? Like she also was massively courageous to go through what she went through, right? And so both of you really embody like a really beautiful divine partnership that created life, not only the life of your son, but you created life in your relationship. You really created a connection. You created real understanding, which is what this whole thing is really about. So I love your story. I'm just super grateful that you came here to share with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.